It's time once again to slip into your camo, grab your bow, and join us out in the field for another episode of the Up North Journal, presented by PSE Archery. The Up North Journal crew is knocked and ready to rock for another exciting adventure. So let's step outside and hit the trail.
Hey everybody, Dan DeFaw here, co-host of the Up North Journal, and you're tuning into a mini podcast where we're going to elevate your game in the archery world by listening to a tech tip from PSE's own Bobby Vargas of the PSE Marketing Department. So stay tuned and listen in.
Welcome back for another PSE Tech Tip. We've got Bobby Vargas on, and yeah, I bet it's hot out there, right?
It is. You guessed it.
It's always hot out there when we call. All right, well, we're approaching archery season, and, people are shooting 3D tournaments, and, they've been out practicing in their backyard, but it comes time now they want to start tuning their broadheads. So when we get to that point, how do we tune our broadheads when it comes right down to brass tacks? What do we need to think about? What do we need to do?
There's a lot of different things that we can do, and it first starts with the right arrow. Your arrow has to be the correct spine for the bow setup that you're shooting. If your arrow's too weak or too stiff, you're not gonna get great performance out of any broadhead. So you need to make sure that you have the right arrow for your setup. And then from that point, choosing the type of broadhead is important too. For me personally, I'm a huge fan of mechanical broadheads. I've shot fixed-bladed broadheads and mechanical heads for years, and I've had really good success with both. And I still use both, but primarily I shoot Swacker broadheads right now. The reason I like those is they fly just like your field points. So there's really not a lot of tuning involved other than in practice. I still recommend practicing with them just to be sure. Even though I'm 100% confident in my point of impact with those Swacker heads, or after practicing with my field points, I can put that broadhead on and hit right where I was aiming with my field points. But still, for anyone else out there considering those, try them just so you know and you have that confidence when you're out in the field. But when you're putting any broadhead on your arrow, you're changing the dynamics slightly. Their broadheads are longer than your field point. They're bigger than your field point. There's so much more surface area out front to contact the air and make your arrows do weird things. But most of today's broadheads have come a long way from what they used to be years ago, and they've had to because bows are getting faster and faster and faster. But because of that, most of your fixed-bladed broadheads that are designed for high-performance bows are going to be really low profile with a relatively small cutting diameter. I say small being 7/8 inch, 1 inch, 1 1/8, even 1 1/8 that's getting a little big, I would consider for a broadhead that I would shoot out of a high-performance bow. But really, the best thing you want to do is make sure that your bow is tuned. If your bow's not tuned and you don't have the right arrow, your broadheads are not going to perform for you. So it's got to start with a finely tuned bow, the right arrow, and then getting that broadhead to work for you. And at that point, if your arrows are right and your bow is tuned, most of today's heads are going to shoot well for you, but you need to make sure that what I like to do when I'm setting up a fixed head or any broadhead for that matter is I put them on a spin tester, and I put them on that spin tester to help me find a broadhead that fits square on the shaft and spins true. What I mean by that is if you put on a spin tester and you spin it, and you look at the tip of that ferrule, the tip of that broadhead, and if that's wobbling out front, then you don't have a true square broadhead on your shaft. And if that broadhead makes your arrow wobble, you're not going to have the consistency and the accuracy that you did with your field points. So I match my broadheads up with my shafts until I have a batch of broadheaded arrows that spin true and perfect. And in the past, people liked to line up their blades with their fletchings, and I don't really feel like you're getting a big advantage with that. I think the biggest advantage you're going to get is getting a good solid broadhead that's square to your shaft and spins true. And at that point, practice with them. It's worth the investment to practice with a couple of them, shoot them out at long distance, make sure you're hitting what you're aiming at, and once you get to that point, you're good to go. Take them out onto the range and practice on the real thing at that point.
So you got to have a good foundation to start with. Otherwise, what you're building upon is pointless.
Exactly.
No pun intended. I don't know if you caught that or not. But no, seriously though, I mean, you got to have a really good foundation to work off of. Otherwise, it's just the whole setup's just going to be kind of pointless. Of trying to, you're working through a lot of problems, and really you need to go back and start from a good solid foundation.
So get your bow to your retailer, have them check it out, make sure your bow's tuned, make sure you have the right arrows, and if you have those set up in place first, then your broadheads will be a breeze at that point.
Awesome. Well, and as always, you guys got a lot of tech tips videos over on your PSC YouTube page that people can check out as well, and maybe getting some of those basic setups taken care of, right?
That's right. Check out the YouTube page, and we talk about just about everything from bow setup to fine-tuning on there.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us this week on PSE Tech Tip.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to that tech tip in our mini podcast. And if you'd like to hear our full-length version podcast, come on over to our webpage, upnorthjournal.com, and you can check out all our full-length version podcasts there. And also, anything else that we like to do, come on over to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts, and you can check out many more things that we do in the outdoors. So give us a listen.